Well, it seems like the YouTube community is coming to a consensus at least. I was drawing up the blueprints for this video a few days ago, woke up on Sunday, July 4th, which is today, and noticed that Sotek and the Grugening had to come to the same conclusion. Yes, the Ogre Kingdoms are very likely to be the pre-order race for Total War Warhammer 3. Now, this isn't an entirely new topic. If you remember back on Super Bowl Day 5 months ago, February 7th, 2021, I made a video fully explaining why I felt the Ogres were most likely as the early adopter bonus. I'm not going to rehash all those same exact points here. I think I did a pretty good job laying the groundwork for why they are a logical inclusion in that role, but I will remind you of a few of them just to jog your memory. Thankfully, I don't have to rehash that video because there's a mounting body of evidence to suggest that this is the direction Creative Assembly are going, on top of all the major points I've already made. It's not about want, it's not about desire, it's not about whether or not there should be a pre-order bonus, it's just about cold hard logic, knowing that there will be one regardless. I want to make it clear, it is still entirely possible the Dogs of War are coming instead, or that the Ogres will be the first full campaign pack a couple months after launch, or even that the Chaos Horse will tip their Babylonian hats and welcome Hashut, Father of Darkness, to the trilogy on day one. But if you take a look at how Creative Assembly does stuff, and think about all the information we have at our disposal now, the Ogre Kingdoms have to be the frontrunners for that pre-order slot. And in my opinion, it's not particularly close. First thing I want to do is turn your attention to the blog post about Ogre Mercenaries that CA posted 2 days ago. In it, they talk about how these 5 new Ogre units are the final major addition to the second game in the trilogy, that this taster is but a mere morsel of what might lie in their kingdom beyond, and that they will spin us a tale, one of the mysterious east, of new realms of conquest, of demon armies clashing, headed by terrible creatures, of the maw and its insatiable hunger, and the legends that tell of a way to finally sate it. Here's to the future. For one thing, that's a pretty clear hint that they're going to play some role in the campaign, that the narrative of Warhammer 3 will include a way for these people to throw off the burden of their endless need to feed, to unshackle themselves from the corruption of the great slavering maw, a curse that has haunted them for thousands of years. Clearly, we already knew that the Ogres were going to be a playable faction. All major army book races are confirmed to be in the trilogy at some point, but to outright tease their entire roster right now tells us there are immediate plans to tackle them either at launch or extremely quickly after launch. Alongside the major marketing push for Game 3, it's logical to tease content that will be available in Game 3. Then there's the curious case of Mournfang Cavalry, whose inclusion unironically brings layers to this whole debate. First off, if we were told months ago that we were about to get Ogre Mercenaries, I don't think anyone in their right mind would have expected to see one of their premier, unique, monstrous cavalry units. That is not a unit you develop for funsies in your spare time, and more importantly, it is not a unit you develop for the Dogs of War. If this update had only been man-eaters, I think the DAO had a much better argument there, because man-eaters travel the world. They are the quintessential merc unit, who sell their services to Cathay, to Nippon, to the Pirates of Sartosa, and beyond. Mournfangs don't, and they are a headlining unit of the Ogre Kingdoms 8th edition army book, amongst the best units in their entire arsenal. Now obviously, this crappier version of them are playing the role of mercenaries in Warhammer 2, but I'm saying from a lore perspective, you will often see man-eaters join Dogs of War companies, while monstrous cavalry is pretty far outside the DAO purview. If and when Dogs of War come, they will not have Mournfangs. It's a very important point. But the other, potentially even spicier point to make about them, was shown off by Gotrek Beastslayer on the Total War forums, using my thumbnail and gameplay footage to make his argument. If you look at the Mournfang unit card, the mounted ogre in it is wearing a traditional spiked helmet, one that is noticeably absent from the in-game models. Why is that important? Well, on the tabletop, the heavily armored variant of Mournfang Cav shared more in common with Iron Guts than they do regular ogre bulls, yet the models we have currently are just normal ogre bulls. There's a noticeable discrepancy between the unit card and how the unit actually looks in-game, which means it's a finished unit card for a different unit. This is the lower armor, slightly poopier version of the decked out, warplate covered Iron Gut style Mournfangs the Ogre Kingdoms will actually get, and the unit card reflects that. So we have a completely unique monstrous cavalry model that's obviously very expensive to produce, and they're represented by a unit card and assets that aren't even in the game yet. but are clearly ready to go. We know that Creative Assembly likes to double dip on asset creation. The fact that a not insignificant portion of the roster is now already in the game, that gives us the best evidence yet that Ogre models are sitting around, ready to launch with Warhammer 3. Now, yes, there is the possibility that this is a Bretonnia type situation, where a handful of units are created beforehand to give you something to fight as Cathay when you're crossing through the Mountains of Mourn, to add some flavorful units to the game without having to create the entire roster yet, and I certainly think we should entertain that as a possibility, that these 5 units we already have right now will be around as a placeholder of sorts for when the real Ogres come. But there does come a point where you're rejecting the evidence of your eyes and ears in the hopes that they won't be a pre-order race, simply because you feel like they won't be done justice in that capacity, which is a perfectly reasonable worry, given that Norska has been stuck with 2 lords since the end of Warhammer 1, and the obviously less than stellar implementation of the Warriors of Chaos at the outset of this trilogy. But we should get out of that mindset that a pre-order race means a poorly crafted race, that a pre-order race means a low on content race. Warriors of Chaos was 5 years ago. It was a different time. There were different expectations associated with this trilogy. It was a different financial situation. It was well before Creative Assembly fully had a grasp on content creation and how to handle a behemoth this large. I think a lot of people right now are worried that if the Ogre Kingdoms are a pre-order faction, then they'll launch with a smaller portion of their full roster than they probably should, that they'll only have 2 lords, and more importantly, that they'll languish without updates, improvements, or lord packs for years afterwards in the same way that Chaos and Norska did. I'm here to tell you that while that is not an unreasonable fear, I don't think it will apply to Warhammer 3, especially considering this monster update coming with the Silence and the Fury, and the clear dedication and momentum the devs have shown in fleshing out Warhammer. If the Ogres are the pre-order bonus, yes, it's entirely possible they only launch with 2 lords, Greasus Goldtooth and Scrag the Slaughterer, but they will likely have the vast majority of their 8th edition army book ready to go right away. And even if they don't, Creative Assembly is well aware of how popular they are, especially after gauging the reaction to their mercenaries, and they will want to update them quickly thereafterwards. So it won't be years after their edition before they get new content. So I think that worry can be put on the back burner for now. Also important to point out that there's simply less opportunity for DLC campaign packs like Tomb Kings or Vampire Coast in Game 3, because we're frankly just running out of races to choose from now. So that kind of content won't take away from the development and improvement of core factions like it did in Game 2, meaning it's easier to update the homies that are already there. And again, maybe the most important point I can make on this topic is a simple question of geography. Consider the Game 3 map. Consider the Mountains of Mourn, the traditional stomping grounds of the Ogre people. They're in a central location, bordering the Darklands to their west, the Great Steppes to the north, the Dragon Isles to their south, and Grand Cathay to their east. We know that Cathay will play a massive role in Game 3's marketing push. We know they'll be an important part of the narrative, and we know they're the new kids on the block, so the devs will want to take extra care in their design so they'll be received better. If you're an 8th edition army book, people are going to be super hyped for you anyway, but you need to make a good impression if you're the new kid getting lore for the first time. Kislev has their main rival in the Demons of Chaos, and while Tzeentch is inextricably linked to Cathay, and I fully expect there will be some major conflicts on that front, with invasions of the Great Bastion, in the lore, Cathay's major rival are the Ogre Kingdoms, who they have a long history with, and who they called the Great Maw down upon with a coven of astromancers, cursing them for all eternity. I do not see Creative Assembly having such a major focus on Cathay, while giving them only 5 units to kill on their western border. That's going to get boring very quickly. That will not make for an amazing Cathay campaign experience. The Ogres simply share many more borders with many more races in Warhammer 3's campaign map by nature of being in a centralized location. Their absence on launch day would be much more detrimental to the flow of the campaign than the absence of the Dogs of War, or the absence of the Chaos Dwarfs would be. The Game 3 map can be oriented so that the Chaos Dwarfs and the Darklands are at the edge, which lessens the impact if they aren't around for a couple of months, similar to how the Tomb Kings and their absence was handled. They were shoved into a corner or edge of the map, and so not interacting with that space wasn't a big deal, or at least was not as big a deal as it could have been. The same cannot be said for the Chungus boys of the Great Slavering Maw. And that, right there, is the major reason why Ogre Kingdoms are the most likely pre-order bonus. I want Chaos Horse, I want Dogs of War. The former is guaranteed, the latter is certainly a possibility, but I do not think we will see either one of them as the early adopter race. It feels pretty clear cut to me now. These Ogre Mercenaries are a first pass at implementation, a testing ground of sorts, before the main arrival or main reveal later this year. And I for one cannot wait to see what is in store for them and the rest of the day one races. So let me know what you think. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video. Any Pride, signing out for now. Have a nice July 4th. I'm about to go get schwacked.